Welcome to the Untold Story podcast. I'm Martha McCallum, and joining me today on a week when there is just so much happening on the Democrat side with regard to the future of President Joe Biden is Robert Wolf. He is a longtime Wall Street financier and supporter of the Democrat Party as a donor and an inside advisor to presidents as well. So, Robert, it's great to have you with us.
Thank you, Martha.
You know what, Robert, I always like to start the Untold Story podcast by having our guest, most of our audience knows you, but they may not know much about you in terms of your background and how you got so involved in politics. So give us a little backstory on you.
Well, thanks. I'll make it quick, but I think I was born a Democrat. My brother's John, and he was born in 1960, and I was Robert, born in 1962, and I'm from Boston. And my mother likes to say if there was a third, it would have been Ted. So I think I think that's kind of was probably in my blood from day one. And then, Martha, as you know, Wall Street, in the 80s and 90s really were very active in politics. There was a point where it was called FIRE, finance, insurance, and real estate, were really the largest donors and insiders in politics. And so when I was at UBS, after my days at Salomon Brothers, I got very active politically. Starting in early 2000s, I was more of an anti-Bush and against the war than pro-Kerry. And it's the list that you can't get off. It's the gift that keeps on giving, unfortunately. And then I got very active from then on and was one of the original supporters of then Senator Obama and my wife and I through his first big fundraiser. And then I became his economic advisor for 8 years as a 3-time appointee. And then you kind of just stay involved, and it became a bit of a passion for me, and so here I am today.
Well, you raised several things that I'd like to dig into a little bit with you, but I want to start with where we are right now in this process, because what's so fascinating about covering politics, which I've done for a long time, is that you just never know what kind of twist is going to happen in the road. So just a few days ago, the post-debate take was that Biden's days and hours were numbered as the nominee of the Democrat Party. He, I think, single-handedly has wrested this back into his own corner by saying, I am not going anywhere. I have all of these delegates. He's got most of the 4,000 Democrat delegates. At the moment, here as we sit here on Tuesday, July 9th, it seems like he's winning that. Is he?
Yeah, and Martha, I think you have been at the pulse of what's been going on since Thursday. The volatility has been insane. You could say in some ways us as Democrats and probably most of the country went from like disbelief what happened that night to kind of realizing that, politics is a daily game. Polls change, the pulse of the party changes. And so, yeah, I would agree with you. It felt to me like there was just a wave coming hard at President Biden. But I actually think it's kind of reversed itself, partially because, and you know me, I'm a pragmatist. I think the media has been somewhat unfair and imbalanced. I don't think you have. I think you've been fair and balanced, and I appreciate that. But I do think like this idea that we're worrying about the font size on his speeches seems insane to me. And I think we've kind of just missed this whole idea. I also think he has moved from digging in to going on offense. This is someone who has won when there was a majority of naysayers continually. Mm-hmm. And I think he believes in himself. He believes in what he's done as the president, and he's a fighter. And so, yeah, I would say it went on offense. And you and I chatted a little about it recently. But yesterday, he won the day. Over the weekend, you and I chatted, and we thought there was going to be this wave of naysayers coming out. And the truth is, In Washington, it was like 30-1 supporters. The Black Caucus, the Hispanic Caucus, Hakeem Jeffries, AOC, Senator Schumer, Governor Moore, Governor Whitmer, Governor Newsom, and we can keep on going.
Yeah.
So I agree with you. It's kind of reversed course. We'll see if that's the way it keeps going now.
I'm not sure that it really matters what any member of Congress says in this process, because the delegates are gone, and I don't know how much America really cares what congressmen or women tell them about how they should vote. But the donors, if the money dries up, that's a little bit more. Maybe, do they have more power than Congress, the donors?
So it's interesting. I think, and you and I have talked about the process. I think the idea that President Biden was ever exiting before he goes from presumptive nominee to gaining the nomination was, people just not informed. He will be the nominee. And then at that point, he has the delegates, he has the money, he has the loudest voice on the direction. I think he will stay in and continue with the ticket of being the candidate along with Vice President Harris. I do think that the donor calls went from the first one you and I spoke about a week ago, where there was like 600 people on. And I think the first two questions asked was, the first one was something like, okay, what happened? And, is he fit for office? And the second question is, if the polls break, then what? And neither were answered. And a large number of donors left the call. And that led into this weekend of a lot of disarray that we chatted about. But yesterday, he kind of really took back the horns. And he started with the letter to Congress, which was very forceful. Then he went on the donor call himself. Mm-hmm. And I thought it was a very good call because I wasn't expecting him to be on the call. And the idea that the president of the United States is going on the call with donors is a good thing. I don't care what anyone says, whether he answered 4 questions or 6 questions. He got on the call, and I think he made people feel good that the direction is now we have to unify against beating former President Trump, and we have to keep our eye on the ball. And so I think it redirected. Then you had a bunch of people come out and support. And now he's going into NATO for 3 days where, there's no better presidential bully pulpit than when you're the commander in chief. So I think, I think it's going to be a positive next few days as well.
Okay. How much of this momentum swing back to Biden comes from the fact that the days of scrambling led to no clear person to replace him?
Yeah, I don't think there was ever going to be a person. I think that I think this idea that there's a bunch of elders smoking cigars and drinking whiskey in some back room and looking for this brokered convention of the past doesn't exist. The idea that the Democratic Party was going to have one of these crazy conventions and West Virginia stands up and says, I'm for Joe Manchin, and Vermont stands up and says, I'm for Bernie Sanders, as if the primary season didn't take place and that President Biden doesn't have 90+% of the votes, I think is nothing short of just making stuff up. I wasn't going to say the swear word, but making stuff up. So I don't think that was ever a real. I think
there was discussion about trying to find someone else, but there isn't really anyone else.
There's only discussion versus a lot of people that just feel like they want to be in the mix. If you know the process, and I know that you have people who are smart, like James Carville talking about a process now. I don't think that's real. I think, though, that is some people wishing that could happen. I think as long as the presumptive nominee is continuing, i.e. President Biden, and he has the purse strings of north of $200 million of the Biden Harris campaign money, that there was nothing that was going to change that. Post President Biden being the nomination, if he decides to do something, it begins with him. I don't think he will, but it starts with him.
The Untold Story continues right after this.
Yeah, Jim Carville had this idea to do 4 town halls in the 4 regions of the United States, facilitated by Barack Obama and Bill Clinton. Even if you could get them to do it, it would be an obvious statement of rejection of Joe Biden.
Yeah, that's not going to happen. And neither is the other one where Taylor Swift and Oprah Winfrey are going to be the judges. Let's just say, Martha, that's everyone trying to have more authority and more power than they have, and throwing darts against the wall. They just don't stick.
So one of probably the most serious question here is whether or not the current president is a national security risk, and whether or not the performance that we saw the other night, which he has called one bad night, can be erased by these other sort of more forceful moments for him. And there's all this discussion about whether or not he was reading from notes when he was on Morning Joe, and whether or not people write stuff down for him to say. So now he has this NATO moment. And, we remember the last international moment where he sort of wandered off during the parachute jumps. And, whether he was going somewhere with direction or not, Prime Minister Maloney felt like she needed to go grab him and pull him back. Then we saw President Obama grab his hand to get him off stage. These are real things. Can this president, do you feel confident that he can be woken up in the middle of the night? We have to take someone out, Mr. President. Can you make that decision right now?
Yeah. So listen, Martha, so let me just start with the last question. Yes, I do. I think there's not a question that he is capable, and that he has the wherewithal to be our next president. But I'm a pragmatist. Do I think that was a good night? Hell no. I think it was just the opposite. I'm still trying to understand what the F happened. I don't know. And Martha, I think you've known me long enough. I don't view myself as like this type of enabler. I'm kind of a fastball pitcher. And I think back of the conversations and the meetings I've had with him over the last 6 months. And yeah, I walked away saying he was old and he was frail, but he was capable. We chatted about NATO. We chatted about the Israel situation. We chatted about gun reform. And so, I was one of those individuals. I've been around, politics for, 25 years now. I was one of those individuals that said, we shouldn't have a primary. He's the incumbent. He's the right person. We can win. And I still think I stand by that. But Thursday night definitely threw me for a loop.
All right, let's talk about he can win, because Carville says he cannot win. And that really is what it all comes down to in terms of, everyone can say, oh, we're all going to support President Biden and we're going to keep him as the nominee. The question is, can he win? And the numbers don't look so good right now.
Yep. So I think that's fair. So let me give you some of my background. When Hillary Clinton was at 65% and Barack Obama was at 1%, I was like one of the first ones, if not the first one in New York, to back President Obama and do his first event, and felt like there was a change in the air and this could happen. My friend James was on the other side of that. Mm-hmm. When President Biden, before he decided to run in 2020, I went on Showtime The Circus and said, I hope former Vice President Biden, I hope he decides to run and I will be backing him. James Carville and many of the geniuses of the Democratic Party thought he had no chance. They were either for Mayor Pete or Kamala Harris or Beto O'Rourke. So I think that I have a pretty good street sense and gut feel for, my own intuition. Yes, I think he can win. Absolutely. I mean, let's be honest. It starts at 46% each. Okay. So we're talking about, 8 states within a few 100,000 votes. If you look at the most recent polls, I think you have President Biden is up in Michigan and Wisconsin and within the margin of error of just about everywhere, and then down in Pennsylvania by 7 points. I don't believe any of those polls. But if you look at those polls, you would say it's a race and it's within the margin of error. My view is things change. This is going to be an incredibly close race. I think, from my perspective, that we have very strong governors in the swing states. We have strong individuals running in Nevada and in Pennsylvania and Arizona that can really make a difference, whether it's Senator Casey or Senator Rosen. So I actually think that we could have a good night, and I think we can win, but it doesn't feel as good right now. That's for sure.
Mm-hmm. So what are the things, the sort of markers that you're going to be watching in the next, over the course of these conventions in terms of what will matter with swinging that pendulum? I think the first thing that will make a difference is we have to get unified that Biden is the nominee, and we have to focus our attention into the Republican convention next week, that there is a huge contrast between President Biden and former President Trump. And we have to get back to that. This is a choice election. And I feel very good with our choice. And we need the entire Democratic Party and hopefully independents and the Nikki Haley voters that are anti-Trump and the Republicans that are anti-Trump. We need to work hard to get them back. Secondly, we need President Biden to start campaigning without the script, without the teleprompter. Let Joe be Joe. He's going to make mistakes. He has great empathy. Let him go about the way he did, I think, in the last few days, whether it was at the Philadelphia church or Wisconsin. And the chips are going to fall where the chips fall. I think it has to be a choice election. We have to make the contrast. And so I think that is going to be critical over the next 30 days, that the Democratic Party gets their narrative back. So let me ask you something on that. Jen O'Malley Dillon as the campaign manager, Anita Dunn, Bob Bauer oversaw the debate prep. Do you think there need to be changes to those individuals? No, I know them all well, and I've done debate prep both with the Obama campaign and the Clinton campaign. So I've been in those rooms. It's 100% on the candidate. Mm-hmm. I blame Joe Biden. I don't blame the handlers. I don't blame anything else but President Biden. He has to be the one that contrasts President Trump, former President Trump, the right way. He had a bunch of beach balls thrown at him and he missed. That can't happen again. And so, no, I don't blame Anita or Bob or Jen or any of them. I blame the president. He had the bad night and it's on him. What do you say to those who say that Jill Biden, the first lady, is, I've even heard people say, oh, this is elder abuse. Clearly it's time for the president to move on. And they say that she is the one who is clinging to power and doesn't want to leave the White House. Yeah, I've heard those rumors too. And, I don't know anything to add to that. I would hope to think it's not true. I believe that this is President Biden's decision, along with his family and advisors, because he earned that right. Now, if he decides to opt out, he earns that right to opt out as well. But, he is the presumptive nominee and he will be the nominee. It will be him to make a decision that changes that, and him and only him. You're saying something now that I just want to, I only have one more question, but you feel that it's locked in through the convention, but that there's still a moment post-convention that could potentially change things once he's the nominee? So once he is the nominee, he really, at that point, the delegates belong to him. The Biden campaign money has already belonged to him. And only he will, both pre and post convention, only he
has a decision to make. And today, the decision, he says very clearly, I'm staying in. My only point is all these other geniuses who have ideas that they're throwing out. There's only one person that owns the keys, and that's President Biden. The rest is just all made up.
Okay. All right. So, little known fact about Robert Wolf, you played UPenn football and won the Ivy League championships in 82 and 1983.
Yes, we did.
What position?
Years. I was fullback. That's 32 was my little league, middle school, junior high, high school, and college number.
Nice. Well done.
After Jimmy
congratulations.
Brown.
That's a fact that you didn't share with us when you gave us your bio, but I bet you would have liked to have.
I would have liked to start with.
So I got it in there for you. Robert, thank you very much. Look forward to this continuing conversation. It's going to be a very interesting summer.
Yes, it will.
Robert Wolf, Democrat, analyst, consultant, advisor to presidents, former finance head, and great to have you with us as always. Thank you, Robert.
Thank you.
You've been listening to The Untold Story with Martha McCallum. Don't forget to subscribe on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. Make sure to rate and review. For more podcasts, go to foxnewspodcast.com. Listen ad-free with the Fox News Podcast Plus subscription on Apple Podcasts, and Amazon Prime members can listen to this show ad-free on the Amazon Music app.